Tangke doji shakjere sondron shinje mada doja panjang pa sirche lambo tabar jibaga shakje jarbu shabdungu shanzar dorjen chanjen delo naro tang maba mala chuje gambo pamu driba jawan rugang wa kaju lama namje da jun she jenye su da su junje dena tu sun shi ba me ye senge kang Nagama de da dam je la lu dang a ye dang we cha je wo da ge lo chu son ro wa sin je lab do so chu lam dan ro wa sin je lab do so lan chu wa se wa sin je lab do so chu wa yi shi son ja wa sin je lab do kang ge din jen ro wa jong ga ba me ba je pa me ba da me ba wa me ba ro me ba ta de to me tu je me Zhuba ni xie xie dian ba, zuba san jie ma nam jie, dang ba de la san sa du, zhen jian za wa lam ma ji jie ku song du jie sen lang da da. Da ge ju lan bu de, da ge den ba dan sen jien jie dong jia jin bong zhu ba ra sen jie la du so. Nam kwa tang, nyam bu sim jin tam jie, jie dong de, den de la na me ba, yang da ba ra zuba san jie. Gongpang rumbo che tobar sha di chi de dambi chu kan hi sin de to nyam sulang war jo nyam ba samba chan chun chu de sim ji ba dang chu nim ba kun ju da kun long ma ner bu gun sim ban sa de la gang sim bar sa we chu ne pa pa zang bo ju ba mo lam che der bo ba a to ni lam sang hi sa wa de she tene de la da ra ye chuk ba te hyupa kabris. Raya chuk ba ra. Yeah,
And cultivate the motivation, thinking that may all sentient beings, limitless as space, attain the state of perfect and complete enlightenment. And think that for this purpose, I'm going to listen to the dharma and thereafter engage in practice. Such a motivation of bodhicitta is the unmistaken motivation for listening to the dharma. And the dharma we are listening to is the commentary on the prayer for excellent conduct called the excellent path of the two that accomplishes the twofold purpose. And in that text, we are now in chapter number 11.
Tatila durjik ding na durni heng nam de hendra samje ma chap sangje nam sangje se ju wu no yukpa la chan chu che pa chu che tawar je song ta durjik ding na durni hi ba de ni go rang la yen la dum pa kap su je pa kan kan sam je pa ji hyu yo ba re wa ta de na tong dan ji ba re Jirdang ke durjik dena durni shibande ngarang tsu ke dene din zambaling ke ndikala samna tawa ina durjik dena durni yobate yang pe lamne hako toba nga he yosare zambaling ke sagang ndigang la namju nga tsu ke ta chi sagang digane zandu shalun papo lon zambeling no palang ju jang drame nis da tene shallo ni pa dang lon ni pa dang no jang ni pa dar jang char ni pa la so bala tene hingkan tamji namju sungho yorwa hingkan ga go ba dan de ta we na yang zamling digang la tene de ta be hingkan ke ta mambo ji yu de ba ta we sano ta na yang yu de ba re mus
And the first verse in this chapter is number 11 here on page 55. May I always behold as many pure lands as there are atoms present in each world, with inconceivable Buddhas sitting in the midst of their bodhisattvas and performing the activities of enlightenment. So in the Tibetan it begins with as there are atoms, or as many pure lands as there are atoms present in each world. So we mentioned that part about the atoms before in the beginning, at the beginning of the 7 branches, and we talked about that quite extensively. So the meaning here is the same. So these atoms, as many as there are atoms, now when we think about this world, for example, so there's different ways of maybe understanding that, but so when we look at this world system, then we have different world systems within that system. And so there is, for example, it's called continents, are basically different worlds within one universe. So there is, in the eastern direction, there is the land of Lupapo, which is the excellent body, and in the south is Jambudvipa, or the rose apple world. In the west is the excellent cow world, and in the north is the world called unpleasant sound. And then there is these pure lands in between, in the intermediary directions, in the southeast and southwest and northeast and northwest and so on. There is various pure lands. There's a huge, vast array of pure lands. And also within this one world system, there are limitless pure lands.
Tande jetang aso jancho samba satambo toyundu. Tene tarate ndi sanje ke yunti jancho ke yunti jata juni se yore. Tene na hinkam ja tuchik jar dun jarwa tongwas hinkam ja. Tene satambo tuso tomdu teke yunti. Tanda yo sungo yo baru. Tene da nga tso tarando ina nga ra tso sa mata pakapsu ina mupa izi jine mupa ton tena wa go yo baru. Tene ta hinkang tanda mambo jin tong na kare che gore samsan rao je yore. Tanda kare che gore se na ta nga ra tso tara mada pa ke lo jin doa. Nda tapa la tsur. Ngo la tsur jir go yore. Tabu ngo le jirtang de karere sena perna tambo choje yore chote tene long changwa namhi changwa tene charam cha song ten te charam de da chur yuya la yangjar ma chola jura taphi jiba na yin cha de yore tambo ni ko charam rido na te ma chola zo go sena te sa kale khando ka bore de tene tambo cho yin ba je charam cha tene chola jura de le la bo yin ba yin do ngaranzu tambu te chezogolo tambu se du ngo ni ni tene chorsuma marwa ngo ni ne manthor ba yin za lower control ju ke le yong za ta tel tartab se na tartaba ji yin za ta tabhi de ji godon jik de re
When a bodhisattva reaches the first bhumi, there are certain qualities that he attains. So generally we speak about 112 qualities of a Buddha, of awakening. And so one of the first qualities a bodhisattva on the first bhumi attains is the ability to behold 100 pure lands in a single atom, a dust mote. So this is what they first see when they attain the first bhumi. And even though we haven't attained the bhumis, we still must have some faith or aspiration in that. So then when they see all these many pure lands, then seeing all these pure lands, what does one then have to do next? So first, what happens is one transforms the impure mind. The impure mind becomes a pure mind. And the way it is transformed is just like, first you have water, and then the weather is getting cold, there's an icy wind, that causes the water to freeze into ice. So then it's ice. Then one tries to melt that ice. And then when the ice is melted, it's water again in the end. So it's because it's water to begin with, it's possible to melt the ice. If the ice wouldn't be water to begin with, then it would be difficult to make it water. But it's because it is already water actually, it's easy to make it water again. And so it's not that we have become confused in that our essential nature has become ever confused, but there is this temporary kind of covering of kind of defilement, obscuring it. And that can come to an end because it is not our true nature. So therefore the first point is that one applies a method to kind of reverse the thing.
Sem sejate tene number mada pakapso tene zangi ke nzimba yuza tene nyarwa si yore yada si yore te teletube ke donghar chechong yore teletube ke donghar damanda nyong yongwa da dere donghar ngus nyong dene tene ta malang ke ne kapso malam la malang ba ha ma odu chowa chetara yoba yindu tene tarang rang chola tike de do ko chowa yoba rwa ta den zang rang zun de zo chu nyam le je ne ji da bu ge na wan de so tene hin kha la so ban de so ngu de ji go yo de gar chen bo cha de yo re ma do ya nga zo je pe na gom nyam le ji shi ba de gar la ro elevator la ma re lo ke nang na lo che so na yi se lan ro ma re de na lo ko so to bo wen la de wa na yi de na yin ji ma re tene ran tombo je gang la ya lep so na yi tene rat tombo ga lep de tene ta ye yung cham chojin chamje ke demo tamje tong demo de ya yi do wa tong wa na yin ke tene gom jam ren yin de nyam le je ren yin de tene ta yung din mun ne zhan ne je ye mi hi wa ke ta de ta bu yung din tamje tong wa de la so ba tu ba nyam su nyong wa tamje yung yu yu ba re ta de da yung ya ke ji de la yang dur ji de na dur ni xian tamje song yung ge yo re 다 된다 힘칸 지보 요바 잠제 된 핑크 요머 힘칸 요나 되네 제 라강도 제 닝지보 제 나는 매매 대완도 제 차노 나는 사크딘서 매대완다 이 차노로와 다 대인자 되는 달라서는 산제스 저거는 요 산제다 장조 선바 산제월라 요나 되는 걸 장조 선바 닌투라서 바게 거네 되네 대답 담배 취제 되네 다양 냠파 민바 대 답이지 요바 대남에 빠지고 요래 고 요러와 고 요러 다냠 맞아 냠리 제베 그 돈을
So first the mind is in an impure state, and we grasp, fixate on good and bad and so on. And therefore, as a result, there is an actual experience of hell and hungry spirits, and all of these beings experience suffering to varying degrees. And it is an actual experience. For example, also in a dream, when you dream, you might not know that you're dreaming, but you still have an actual experience, a real feeling, even though it's just a dream. And also now in this life, it's the same. We always experience all kinds of feelings. Sometimes we feel well, sometimes we feel unwell. And so when we engage in Dharma practice, through Dharma practice, our perception must become pure. That things are actualized, realized the way they are, which is pure, or a pure land. So this is how we must kind of develop our practice. Meditation, when we practice meditation, then we should not become like someone who is like stuck in an elevator that is broken, so you can't get out, basically. So not like that, but rather we should become like someone who reaches the peak of a mountain and has a beautiful view in all the directions. So just like that, this is how we need to kind of approach the experience of meditation. And so then we continue to engage in practice, and qualities, experiences arise that cannot even be expressed to anyone. But there are many qualities, many experiences that one might see or hear or experience and so on. So such as to see all these Buddha lands, these pure lands within a single atom. So then just to have a pure land on its own alone also is useless. It's just like you have a beautiful temple, but nothing is inside, like there's no statues, nobody is inside. So that's also pointless. So these pure lands are filled with the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, the Buddha in the center and then surrounded by the Bodhisattvas and the Arhats and the Shravakas and so on. And all there is this undiminishing sound of the Dharma. So this is how we should imagine at this time.
Ande soso rani ma thama pandawo ji tini sanje da chanju sambaya yishir yopa te tawe mayin ba. Tina tsikang chi gladwa chancho je pa chu je tawar je sirdu soso rani a te tawe che nyamsu nyong do wa yopa. Tini te ta nyam de la tini soso rani ke tongju te ta hinkam nanglang tong salang tongju hinkam nanglang tongju sanje da chanju samba te tawe me go yore. Tanda kar chimbo hyu je cha de yore. Chab jumsin 대겐 무바데 흉침보 지인도 체 만표보 강도양 단당공도 줘야 요레스 나라서 마흉원이네 마흉보 원도네 대답 흰칸도 손자야 자야 요바드나 용조 요바레 손코 요레 베르나스 마란소 파르도 tukti 대소 파르도 tukti 난데서 손코 요로와 트람말란 파르도 시바데 말란 방고 시고 요레 다티갑스 대 히바데 추라마 많이 니 마고 뭐도 많이도 네 말랑고 히바 지게 인스 센타 따웨 제세와나 이 생고 나네 타주 그 중르즈나 다 쪼라라레데 요라 문네 그 카이 니미게 문네 히가 지바인스 힌두 침보 요바질라 히바 지바이 지게 사 타제네 저랑 고마 찍려니 솜니려니 썰니 다와 찍사나니 만타야 말람티마 찍사 모히바 차그레스 베나 추랑아드레 산이 효바 산이 효바가다 추종아발라 가힐은 로고요 남르나 대회는 아드레 추주 두주게 알랑클록 제조 대게 요야무도시 다데딩 산이가 추종아발라 랑토바이 고요 산 심낭르고 타노제 요지나 니세용 거요 추종아발 니세가 되는 냠냠 참말라 요로 만볼 요로 디 나인게로와 조랑 그 단다지네 땅은에 말랑도 말랑이 방어 히바지기 말랑그 내갑수 삼네 단다지라 되네 다와 찍사나님 맘타야 말랑 찍서 뭐 히바 다 단다위도 조랑 말랑테 팅마 되는 거 히소마이나 말랑테 말랑이 바 팅마 되는 거 히소마이나 파르도 내갑수 조랑 그 파르도라 파르도에 방어 히바 차거를 쓴 거요래 다 같이 나랑 졸라 지 투야지 린도아 제다 마지에 그 제발자마도 다 된도 다 말랑라 데이터브 지토고요 바르돌라 데이터브 지토고요 바이나 다 진짜라 제 현강 유동와도 문도 줄바 가르치는 지토고 미바레 저런 포인 비짐신 모인 비짐신 강야 요마레 저런 로긴바인 비짐신 용바인 비짐신 강야 요마레 순라제게 다 데이터브 현강당 되는 유바 산제 세와담 용도 지긴 삼바이나야 샘제 유찬네 zonde 지당지 히 대표 우주 우니 zonde 특고요 바레 세 네네 다데소다 다 제네 네네 냠리난 거요 바레
So then also when you shouldn't see yourself as just like an ordinary person thinking that that we cannot see those pure lands and all these Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, and we have Adam filled with pure lands and Bodhisattvas. It says here in the end of that line, so the Buddha is sitting in the midst of the Bodhisattvas and performing activities of enlightenment. So through these activities, anyone can actually experience the Pure Lands. So I myself also can experience it just as they have experienced it, those Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have experienced it. So I myself can experience the outer and the inner worlds or cosmos as Pure Lands. And so this is what should be in the mind, first of all, that just as they did, I can also do it. And when that is, of course, a bit difficult at first, because it is difficult at first, we first must develop a very strong aspiration. And it's because of a very strong aspiration, it's because of this determination that is in the mind that one will be able to actualize whatever one has in mind, whatever is one's aim, even if it's difficult to begin with. And if one perseveres in this determination, then one will be able to see the Pure Lands. So it's really all up to kind of the strength of one's own mind. You basically make up your mind. For example, when we receive teachings on the 6 bardos, one of the bardos is the bardo of dreaming. And in that context, there are instructions on how to recognize the dream as a dream. So to recognize that you're dreaming while you're dreaming. And in order to be able to do that, in those instructions, it is said that before you go to sleep, you make up your mind. You are fully determined. I am going to recognize the dream state. I must recognize the dream state. So you're completely determined to accomplish that before you go to sleep. And then it is through such a perseverance, kind of a diligent, a persevering determination, that it arises the way you had imagined. So perseverance also, as you mentioned before, diligence also is related to enthusiasm. So you do that with great, you're driven to do it. You want to do it, so you do it with all your heart, wholeheartedly. So you make up your mind, I'm going to recognize the dream state, and then maybe 1 or 2 or 3 nights go by. But at the very least, if you have that determination, if it's that strong, then at the very least, in the beginning, you will recognize the dream state at least once a month, one time in 1 month. For example, it works sort of like this. If tomorrow morning you have to get up at 5 in the morning because you have an airplane to catch, but then your alarm clock isn't working, then you have to really make up your mind. You have to be determined. I must get up at 5 a.m., otherwise I will miss my flight. So you are so determined that when you fall asleep that you are sure that you must wake up at 5, and then you will wake up. So probably many of you have experience with that. So it's just a bit like that. You are determined, I'm going to recognize the dream state, I must recognize it. And if you have this determination all the time, then at least one time in a month or so, after 1 month or so, you will recognize the dream state. And it is said that once one has recognized the dream state during the dream 7 times throughout one's life, then one will also recognize the bardo as the bardo when you're there. So therefore, what really depends on any accomplishment is your determination, is to be sure that I am, no matter what, this must happen. I will do it. That is really what it depends on. It's the force of your mind. And if you are determined to recognize the dream state and you recognize it, you will also recognize the bardo later on. So, and then it doesn't make a difference like who you are, in what circumstance you're in, whether you are male or a female, or you're old and young. It has nothing to do with anything like that at all. It has to do with the determination in your mind. So if you have faith and you make up your mind, I'm going to actualize these millions and limitless Buddhas in all those pure lands, I'm going to see them, then because you're determined that you know that you will, because it's all up to your own mind, then you will. So that's what it all depends on. And it is basically really with that resolute mind that we should generally approach practice.
다 되네 되어도 산제 지행 따와란 주바 넘바 니바데리 대터 말루 탐제 초서 양 짜점 중라 두숨 체니제 산제 잠소 행나 잠소 까바 잠소 주제 랍든 조소 단데 조 다시 간라 더 차라고 때나 송송아 더 차람들라 양 담보 더 차라 코랑 하마오드 테스칼레 카보 요나 되는 디칸산 단초여 다데 간타르치 짜점 세나리 nga랑 짜짜 살아양 빈도야 짜지와 데이터 쯤모 찌그 강라양 산나타는데 짜 짜그쯤모 드나 찌그 강라 되네 다시 hinkham samjin machapa tene hinkham de tendo tene sanje samjin machapa sanje da jancho sumba samjin machapa yoba tene de aje da duk kala sar yongdu de de aje sam samji yongwan ro sam samji wa ta de ta ma yin ba da tar mulam ja mo ba chin du tene karba karba jamso se jamso hiwa de zomta me ba ka tong ra la ya ya re tara beji na ne te ta ba la de ne ta de so sanje de so hyarn jar song tu ba la so ba yong kyo se ba tong da ro.
And then the second part here, second point of those 8 is there are 2 aspects of entering in the practice of viewing the Buddha fields, the Buddha lands. And so the first one here is the same verse. Yeah. So it's the last verse on page 55. In this way, may I be able to see everywhere, even on every mode of dust, countless Buddhas of the past, present, and future, limitless pure lands and endless aeons. So before we talked about the smallest atomic particle, the subatomic particle, and if that was a little difficult to understand, then also you can think of it in this way here, like in this verse here. So it says in this way, on the tip of a single piece of hair, there are countless Buddhas of the past, present, and future, and limitless pure lands, and so on. So, and it says so if you have a strand of hair, or a piece of like a fine piece of like grass, but maybe a very fine hair, and you just take this little tip, the very tip of that hair, and on that tip, in a space as small as that tip, there are inconceivable pure lands, and within those pure lands there are myriads of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And so this prayer is, may I be able to see them everywhere, so on every tip. And then also at all times, so not just sometimes I see it and sometimes I don't see it, but seeing it all the time. So endless aeons here, in general, this term aeons often just means something that is endless, like an endless time. May I see them for an endless time.
다 다라 dur charab hibanda dang Tene tara duke tone, duke jingma shiba tuso tola. Ta hida inang de ko keja hiemba, inake pe de yapo ji lao song ji. Ta ti pe de ngaran su tara satang la kaba na yoba sabra de kala gro. Kaba na yoba de la zoom chi chong ji yang do. De lan ti pe de yapo hyu ji no. De nga zu nda cha de yore ngene. Je rakpa ro pa ta andu. yang chi rakpa kanang ya mangbo ji halam san thong yo re de ma cha hin cha wala ma song na cha wa de sun thong tu ku yo ma re de ne ma cha hin cha wala jing ro da de do cha lab song wa san je je wa ja tong song song wa ta tin nam ya ta we na ma cha hin cha wa yong du de do ze rakpa ngo de chal lem de rakpa tho de ne chu tam jin thong ya de le la po cha de yo ro wa 다 디 짐생을 때네 맞죠지 다 곰지야 될 넘버 2 요래 넘버 7대 맥바 제직라 메인에 대야 마망보 드림도네 곰자야 지 요래 되니 곰자야 지대 맞죠다 인지게랑 티 파휴 요야나 액티브로 라서 말왜 액티브 무스치 다직 삼익 지네 삼노 그 비주 땅의 직 삼노 땅도 들어와 곰 뭐마 장송도서 로 이레살라 추원 담라 초침보다 나간 담라 로 이레살라 데이거드 초와라 야마 다 dun타징이 섬서 초와 마송와 드라 용도 라 망보 요래다 때다 때 가르치 용거 요래 용야데 가르치 용거 요르스나 다 셈되게 드라베나 다직 쳐조글로 gom de khala che mi pa te ne te bin ro du tene ta te ko gandar dara ngarang zo de wo bo tamji na ne cha hin cha wa dang hin sa wa de kareris na sem de re de yo ba de ta sem ji na na ma hyong ba ke chu ka yang mi sem ji na na ma hyar bu chu ka yang mi sem ji khalo jor menu pa 추가야 미드 되니 다 따라서 장송도 소드나 샘그 칼로지온 되니 다 대답 그 초와지 해서래 나랑서 샘 요래 샘원데 다 장송도 소나 이외는 로만볼라 네윈 발에 요마다 바이나 양다 도서 다 산제기 현다 더처럼도 소라 되니 미바 양세 때 럽다 주대 가르치 못 차도 요래
So regarding this discussion on the smallest particle or the subatomic particle and also the single moment of time or single moment of consciousness, actually just before over the lunch break, Ina and I had a discussion about this, and so she pointed out that there is maybe it's like a map, like in a GPS that we have in our iPhone, where you can zoom in and zoom out. And so that's actually a very good example. So it's a bit like that. So when you kind of zooming out the map, then you just see everything kind of overall, more coarsely, like you have a rough image of the whole thing, but then you don't see what is like the details. So unless you zoom in, you won't see all the towns in the different details on the map. But then if you zoom in, the more you zoom in, the more detailed it gets. So for example, it's when we zoom in to the different particles, then we see even the subatomic particles as we zoom in more and more. And then one sees all the myriads of Buddhas within all of these subatomic particles. And then once one has seen that, then when one zooms out again and comes back to the more coarse overall picture, then one has already seen, because one has already seen how things really are, then actually to see all phenomena at the same time while also seeing their nature becomes quite easy then. And so when we meditate, there is two ways of meditating. The first one is where we just single-pointedly stay with our focal object and we don't think anything. And the second one is a more active meditation where we really are using our mind. For example, in the past, there were rishis who spent their time meditating on the banks of the river for like 4 years. But how it appeared to them was, it was just like 1 or 2 weeks. And the reason why they had such a perception of time is because of their focus in the meditation, because they were focusing single-pointedly in their meditation. And then within that state, one reaches very subtle, deep levels of the mind. And actually, as one kind of zooms in deeper and deeper and deeper, so one comes to a very subtle, like kind of zoomed in level, and the most subtle, refined, and pure state that exists is the mind itself. And there's nothing that is not encompassed by the mind. Everything is in the mind. There is no phenomenon that does not arise from within the mind. And so because everything comes from that mind, it is through the mind that we can also change or transform phenomena. So, and then because of that, these rishis having control over their mind, knowing that everything comes from the mind, they were able to change things, manipulate their perception of time. So then this is how they felt about it. So even though maybe we are not able to live like the rishis and seclude ourselves to isolation, but we still have that same mind. And therefore, if we are able, if we apply ourselves to practice, there is nothing that actually really essentially keeps us from seeing the Pure Lands in every atom. And so to do that, therefore, it's important that we again and again, we direct our mind to that, to the kind of zooming into those most subtle subatomic particles and all the Pure Lands contained.
Tutsu Koran la ya ren kyo juma tong kyo ya za kyan yo mare tutsu Koran. Yin na yang nga tsu ko tsornang la tsam tsang nga rang tsu chi ta suso la chi tsornang yo ba ka jawa chi chi tela so ba chi du tene nima re re san dunta re re san kanda gon ro de ha mo le tanda chi ha jang gon jok che jok bo yin ban na wa chi kya ya yo re de yang sem re. Zamzang around so che data tronang mi poke jing jawa ji ji tene ta data ji du tene nima re re tu su re pe ringbo re da nge pe ji hyuna nga dambo nga zo gongpa yo gongpa ne nyungne zo ra nyungne zo de da sama sa chantong cho yo ma ra da nga pe nima de pe ringbo hyu ji zo Nima tu tsu pa rinpo xe ninka ke nima de pe rinpo, te gong mun tsin de pe rinpo. Ngana zha dira tsawa jie nyong nga rang, nam jun de tawa ke ha ko yo marwa, zi mo zi dira zha wan zhong. Ta de de zhu ko tau ko yo re, ka gong ko yo re, teni nyam lin chenpo che gong na che xie yo marwa, driba ta no kore tso che xie yo marwa. Ta na che o ta, yada hipa de ta dongan de le japra ke che yo re kha cha ning ji sa ya ke ning ji cha yang je to ko yo ma re de zhu go to khun do ka gong hon do de zu de pan jo pong do go sang ni ke ni ma de sang ni pa de ke lang yo ro sang ni ma ma hya ke de se ke lang ro ta sang ni ma de la go de ta de ring bo hyu ke cho wa ji de do cho wa de ya sem ri de ma to nyung ne cho di ni ma de ni ma pa ring so ke jun sin ke ma re wa te soso rang na nyam nyong na ten rao che re to de tene nga zo chama sem si ba de wang zin bo hyu re si ta sem ke kalo jo ma ta ba yo ma re dewa tham je sem la tho dunga tham je sem la tho Deha Gogo Yore.
So in terms of time, actually, our perception of time, so we have experience. I also have experience with that, even if you're not really practicing the dharma, but we have different experiences of time. That sometimes time just appears very long, and sometimes it appears like just very short. Basically, if you're doing something that you really like to do, then a day and a week may just pass by and you don't know where time has gone. It's just so quickly. And that's the mind. That's the same kind of mind. And then sometimes when the same kind of mind doesn't want to do something, then just 1 hour appears so long, and a week unimaginably long. For example, I just remembered one story of myself, my own experience when I was young. In a monastery, we had to do the Nyungne retreat, where we are not, you have to fast, you can't eat and you can't drink. And the days just felt like endless. And then the nights were even longer. So it felt just like it never ends. And normally I never really was aware of that it's actually a day is that long. Because normally I'm just playing during the day and time just passes by. But then when I was really hungry and thirsty, time went by so slowly. It seemed like an eternity. And at that time, it's not that I actually knew practice. I didn't even know that through this practice, I'm purifying my obscurations. And perhaps wasn't even able to cultivate compassion, thinking about the suffering of the hungry spirits. I was just really hungry and thirsty, and I just wanted the time to be over. And, we take the vow of the Nyungne from now until sunrise tomorrow. So I would just wait for the sun to rise finally for tomorrow. So it seemed to be an eternity. But it's not that during the Nyungne retreat, the days just suddenly got longer and then they're short again. It's still the same time. It was just my experience of that time. And so that really actually shows us that the mind is extremely powerful. Anything is up to the mind. So the mind can change anything. Everything can be transformed by the mind. One's whole perception of reality is all up to the mind and nothing else at all. So that's also why we say that you being happy or you being unhappy, that all is your own mind, is what you're doing with your mind. So that's important to understand.
That same the counter trobo zambo chinyam den ro tang ro kam si trobo ngimpa chinyam den ro delora le ko yore. Same the trobo ya po chinyam den ro du kare nyam den ro ko yore shirap jamba ningji tani ra ru du ta toni to pa tawa ne lo to pa tawa de su toni de so ron ro ndu ta sem shiba de ngone ra ne ko ta ha jang ke yung tin din ba je cha de yo ba re tani sem de chakpa dangwa cha do tan rin sem tra ga ngala phan ro na ne ta ngarang chu ma ji bu zong khin de sem de re ngone ra ne ma ji ba ma de wa zo ji de chama sem de la tra le de yo re tani ta ten de ko wa se de dik cha ni ta ba re sem shiba de lakpa ngunjam na yire konde lakpa tojab se china ba ko nyo yure kain sena ta tang chik jin du sem ko korang ngwa ne ta hinkham ta bu hinkham na wa tam je ta bu hinkham din ne yu bu sim jin tam je san je da jan shu sa ba cha de ba teni ta tang chik ji du teni ta che ko wa teni sacho melon jongwan thok de ba te tenana yo ba simjin thamje la teni jiga nam chola su ba ge te donga parmi de nyong du yo ba ten so so rani a tin chu du yo ba ta dra ji cha andu sem shi ban da sung job ji ne jar se shwa la ki song yo re sem ko tur yok de 또 욕 탐신은 그 샘라 또 욕 지제다 같이 모인 송 샘의 송국이 송 샘의 야보 송접지 샘숨 송접지 히부동데 샘라 따네 코가 가래 지기도 된 샘의 코 야보 레가 야보 지면도나 되네 할로 시다 꼭 인지게 고는 할로 세견대로 보게 가호요나 가르라가 코레에서 가서 감바길 코레에서는 되게요래 되네 되네 모레에서는 되게 모임보 완잖아 포임보 완데나 코레에서는 되게요래 되네 저 가르치게 요시 주 도전의 동안도 후면다와 되 동안 잘 가르치 주기스 주 도저 대완도 로사드 동안 사실은 로도와스 가르치게 요시 짝짝이 데스 짝짝이 데 가르레 딤바다 희빈이 딤바 시바데 짝짝이 다 딤바 그 세네 센데 존도걸 셈 딤바데 탁바나이 딤바데 탁바나이리 드라베는 가서 냠네 지고요래
So with the mind is just like it depends kind of what the mind is like your friend, and what you follow in your mind is you're the mind, sorry, and what arises, what you follow is your friend. So how you turn out depends on what kind of people you associate with, but talking about the arisings in your mind, not real people. So basically, are you following good friends or are you following negative friends? Following good friends in a mind would mean that you follow positive states of mind, like mindfulness, clear awareness, wisdom, love and compassion, and so on. And ideally, of course, realizing the true nature of things, emptiness. So that is one quality of the mind, that kind of one thing that determines the state of the mind is basically who you associate with inside your mind. On the other hand, if you're associating with attachment and anger and jealousy and competitiveness and so on, if you follow those friends in your mind, then these will only create suffering in your mind. So really, your feeling, your state of negativity and unhappiness is due to your own way of thinking, what you follow. So that is what we basically call samsara. Maybe you have heard this example before. It is said that samsara and nirvana are like the back and the front of one hand, of one palm. It's the same hand, but one is back, one is front. And on the one hand, depending on how we see things, on the one hand, we can see that all appearances are the Pure Land, and all the beings in that Pure Land are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. That's one side. The other side is the samsaric side, where we see a lot of destruction and imbalance of the four elements, a lot of conflict among sentient beings, a lot of suffering such as birth, aging, sickness, death, and so on, endless suffering. And then we also, in a way, are kind of stuck in that kind of existence. So therefore, in order not to be stuck there, we have to protect our own mind. Shantideva had said that the most important yogic discipline is the discipline of your mind. So that means also that you have to protect and guard your own mind. Then when you understand that, then next what are you supposed to do then, guarding your mind? So how are you guarding your mind? You have to see, basically, you have to watch the mind. Like, what is it doing? What is that mind up to? And so then when you see that, oh, this mind is up to nothing good, then maybe you say hello in English, Or if you are from Kham in Tibet, you would say something like Kore, which basically means like dude, or a woman, I don't know, dude ass, I don't know. So you would just like call your mind out. And so like, what are you doing? You're up to no good. Don't you want to be happy? And basically, yeah, of course you want to be happy. And who wants to not be happy? So if you want to be happy, then how come you're actually running away from your happiness? You want to be happy, but you're not actually going there. So you're kind of engaging in this like teasing dialogue with yourself. And so the one who is engaging in this dialogue is your mindfulness and your watchfulness. So the mindfulness seizes, kind of catches the mind. The mindfulness is like a rope. So basically, this is how we should practice.
다 간tar 남도 시반데 되니 쯔나 인차도 요레시 되니 나랑 저게 다쯔 망보 빠라 판로 되니 nga 저게 쯔도 수차마 구조 자야미 바지 조고나 깔레 가보 히르 저랑페나 쯔 자요서 그 힘나지는 송 다ကျွ랑 그 쯔 구조 추니 마자네 쯔 대야요 바지 쯔 자디 조야 그 타피지라 파체 담보 저랑 그 중요하다 깔레 휴요로 쯔 심부 완 세네양 쯔직 그죠 맞아 대로 제는 쯔니 바존도 담보데 그죠 자연 거로 다 된다리저데 나라서 남도데 쯔나 인어와 되니까 남도 게 그죠 자투고 말한 거네잖아 다 샘데 저랑 인바방도 세바이나 다 쯔 유스 빠드나 만로라 쯔 유스 빠 셉트나 만로 마송바이나 되니 쯔 코랑소 파나 파 얌나야 개그지 체파요 말이 ben tarang ngarang zo na de ga du dene ben sacha yin je ne zhu je ge ga che zhu tam je yang pa ma chung go yo na yang sem ra mo do nga zo la di na yin re sem ji ba da bo ja sem hi ba de da bo ja ne da bo ja ya ge ya hyu de dene din pi si din hi de din du da tarang ngarang zo lam dam bu gap so dene din hi la ko yo re Tene te ya nyamni te gong de yan perandu laman nanjol hiba de te cha de yore. Jinrek laman nanjols. Laman nanjols kantar nanjol hiba de ten rawo jiri ta ngarang zu jinba de lama cha de yore. Lama sidu ta nga susu ka zawa lama de cha de yore wa. Susu zawa lama de dorjin chang cha de yore wa. Ta te di indu jinba la to. Tene sem korang ya ba za nye indu Jimba Koran talk the yobari, same day. Zanyin, but Zawano. Take that research in Rogin, take down the Tama Jimba Koran to rally the Yuri. Jimba lost Jurbake, then he sems in a young Joya made the body. That the Ryan's are this same Tama similar rally, Yoba, some down there. That same the oh. 다 드나제 상황 단서데 드니 드르젝 되나 드니 산제 담지 요바 산노 동거나 레라고 요래 다 샘크 토니 지토고 요바데 하고와 제바이나 데 데마도 람상제 드르젝 되 드니 자 강제 갈라 산제 그 힘감 제와 차자 디는 산제의 장조선 바 세와 차자라고 산노 땅아이나 데니 응네 삼노 그 메책 바나 이 차도도
The thoughts in our mind are like monkeys. So imagine like you're going to a place where there's a lot of monkeys, and your task is to to make them all sit still without moving. So there's a forest, the Yoto forest. Let's say there's 100 monkeys in that forest. Your task is to make them all sit still without moving. So that seems like an impossible task, actually, because first of all, it's hard enough to even catch a monkey. So let's imagine you would actually catch one, and finally you grab one and you make them not move. So by the time you catch the next monkey, the first one is already jumping around again. So it's close to impossible to make 100 monkeys sit still. And the same is with the thoughts in our mind, which are like monkeys. We cannot make them be still. No matter what we do, if we pacify one, the next one jumps, and then we catch the next one, the first one jumps already. So it's a bit like that. So then what can we do? So basically, don't go to a forest where there are monkeys. So don't even go there, then you won't have to worry about them jumping around because they are somewhere else. For example, now we are sitting here, probably some other place far away, there are some monkeys jumping around, but it doesn't really bother us, does it? It doesn't really concern us. We don't even know about it. They can do whatever they want because we are not there. So this basically means to protect the mind. This is how we protect the mind. In other words, the best way to protect the mind is mindfulness. So when we first start on our path of meditation, we give it that name, mindfulness. And then as our practice improves and develops, it is said that mindfulness, this mindful knowing capacity of your mind, is actually the guru. That's the ultimate guru yoga practice. So your mindful presence is the actual root guru, and it is called Vajradhara. Vajradhara is nothing but your own mindful presence. And also finding the nature of the mind, the root of the mind, depends on mindfulness, on mindful presence too. And actually there is no separate mind that exists aside from your mindful presence. It's all your mind. Everything depends on your own mind, your state of mind. And so if you see it from this perspective, if you see that because I have that mind, anything can be done with that mind because it's my mind and everything comes from it. Therefore, anything can be seen, anything can be done. It just depends on my state of mind. So if you see it from this perspective, then it becomes easier for you to comprehend how there are millions of Buddhas and Pure Lands inside a single atomic particle, or the tip of a piece of grass or like a piece of hair. So otherwise, if you don't see it from this perspective, if you just hear those words, on the tip of a hair there are so many Buddhas, as many Buddhas as there are atomic particles, and then on top of that there are even more Buddhas, millions and billions of Buddhas. It just seems too mind-boggling. It's hard to comprehend from this perspective.
Ta tene sumba de sanje je songlan jukpa nes de jukpa je usatin sumba de do sung je yin la jam su dra ke ji jawa kunyang yin la nam da pa ro kun je samba ji yin sanje song la ta ju por je song da de kar song da ta ti kap su ti chigang dambo de ki song je yin la si ban de 네, 다 양 가르침보지 차도 요래. 네, 양 셈라라 레도 요래 레죠. 송지니도 송나 양 세남지 송 크레마지 송아이나 양. 도마니 뜻이. 네, 들자 수수 게삼발레당 몰람 라므라 왕게 고처만다 만다 고온로와요 와. 디 지당그다 드나 용고 요래스. 얘네 다 송쟁이라다 인라지 드라케 ta perna che teni gan lu ba na yi lai ke lo ke no jin ke la so ba ga te ke re ma bo tham che na teni kon nu ba teni te ta ba je dang song yang yin la truk ju se ra ta te so la yang song de so la che na war nin ba don ne la ke bo teni te ser song ge tu de song ge du ze la de ba du ze 가르치 듣을라 두 히바데 두 히바데 진누 저 집차니 라용 거요래 누르 집차니 데츠 히바데 Teni tela pamin paras tela pin senti nu dawa teke nu ji matawa shinkin tela pinzi ke chane tse se ta yabarwa namjinga zo dutse shiba drakhe dawa te terewa ten song de dutse na ye chadu kare chare ta tarangaran zo tsawla ma tamje ke ten song chu song dung ne senlo tsarche yin ta yin samsang dawa je tsoga je nde de jin de so so le je hala men so no je rawang me pu ton je nyamni ji go dawa je cha de nyamni de teni je ren yin de teni so so ke nyamda to ba de ya dawa yang ngo yin de gong nen perwa nan de da yong yo ndo so song ge yong de la zo de ne yong ge yo re
Then next is number 3 of those 8, which is the entering into the speech of the Buddhas. And so that's the first verse on page 56. May I always heed the pure speech of the victorious Buddhas, which holds within each word the totality of the perfect dharma and an ocean of languages precisely suited to the needs of each being. So this actually also depends on the mind. And the first line in the Tibetan is let's see. It's like on the front here. So it's that part. Within each word, holding the totality of the. Wait a minute. Oh, it's the an ocean of languages, precisely suited. So that's basically the first line in Tibetan. And so the language perfectly suited. So it says literally, there is an ocean of branches of different ways of speaking, which are all suited to the various beings. So, for example, even if one gives a single teaching, says a single thing, when a teacher says a single thing, one statement, then depending on the karmas and the state of mind of the people who are listening to that statement, everyone will have a different understanding, will interpret that statement in different ways depending on their karmas and their state of mind, their aspirations and so on, their own wishes. So these are those branches. There's different branches, different ways things are heard. But the aspiration prayer is that, as you mentioned before in a previous verse, may the perfect Dharma be heard in an ocean of languages, which is suited to the needs of each and every being. So as you mentioned before, there is the language of the gods and the nagas and the yakshas and the various beings. May they all understand the teachings. So generally we speak about 60 branches of a melodic speech, of a Buddha's melodic speech. And for example, it is that one of them is that the Buddha's speech is pleasant and also skilled in pointing out the key point of the meaning. And then also the speech becomes nectar to those who hear it. This term nectar, actually, in Tibetan, it is duzi. Du means demon or mara. Basically something that causes harm, something harmful. And zi is like an elixir or ambrosia, it is that which prevents any harm from happening. So it remedies the harm. So that's the real meaning of nectar, or tuti, amrita. So the speech of a Buddha is like nectar, like amrita. For example, also when we hear our root guru teaching, when we listen to his teachings, we might just naturally feel, yes, this is how it is, of course. And we also will feel compelled to engage in practice. We feel an urgency to engage in practice. And then if we practice, our practice increases and our experience and realization of the natural state develops. And so mainly that all comes to fruition based on the speech that we have heard from our guru.
Das sanje gen zepa tamche na ne yang song gen zepa te da yong din chi khu za chi khu cha de yore la da ta rang ran zo lo ni tong truk jam sun chu da ta par de sam na tang de ni tong truk ja ni tong truk ja sun chu ti ke ti min chu la sanje gen ran zo long ne ka den chi khu ji da dang gan ra wo ji je ba yin na ran zo long ne ka den ngaran zo ka den chi khu ko chen khu ga da ngaran zo ke sanje la ka den chi khu go sa je ke kong ge ne ngaran zo le yak ba na wo ka re ya ya se de kan jer shi ba da da den dal tin tin jer shi ba de jong wa ro ta kan dar ka tin jer sin an da jar ka jer mo che tan de so ngune da ne ge ngaran zo le ta ya ba nga chu ku ngu se long ju ya yo ngu se pe ju ta ya yo mi da ma su na che ne de ngune na cha tra ya la de rin do da song de dan de ngune xin kin tam je ya anda nga chu pa nyam yon ro jin tan du de ngune che nyam ni che din yong ki ke pa che de din wa de so ge ma to yang ha kong kin de tes ka le kha bu no sa tin so pe na dan de so che song de je pa chi hu hen se ya de lama ge hi ni za chen bo de na hi ni de ne tu he do 당 가랑 로 남만보 지 차라 ge hi ni ma bo ji char wa ne tang ga랑 zur tarang mu su yu de ba nge yang pan tan ro ji go yo wa ta tarang ga랑 cha ma chi ne ba so ta ro cha jab jin gar chen ro bo chi ga re song song se na kong zong kang ne yu de zong ro yo ra zong kang yu bu zhuo bo la ma je ge dep chong se de dep chung chung ma la lak pa sa ji chung chung ji tin de zhe song so de ge hu pin song ser ma zok zam je ser ma ji ge zok zu bo zam je de ba zhe ra de ga do a song so de ta chi ring tang ro de hin de de da ra yong go yo de ma da ser zong a so ge ring tang chen bo zhe yo ro o ser u na de zo cho ra sam san ro ji yo ro ba de da le la bo ma ro wa mu ne ta de ne ta nga zo ge wi hi ni ma bo ke ta de da bo song ne nga ta ra je ren bo che ke tim der tu ba na ya ze pa kun le song gen ze pa ngom sar chen bo so na tu ban ze yo re denis nang lu de yap se la so ba lu de da thomi tham je ke ya san je le ya tu ba chen de zo song ge to nen ze ba de la ngom sar chi song na de ni kan tar me de so wa tham che na ne ya ta de me de so wa re kha ngom sar tham je na ne ya de ngom sar re kha so na tu ba ya che re de jum sen kan re kon na ba ge song de la long se je ne de ni je drone lam tham je ra so wa ro de tarang ngarang so ina ta de ta re ta song de la tin ma bo je la ta phin to ko yo re ye ma da nga zo mo kre ma ji san ji sa la ya ku ta na de gem sin che re so mo tom tha tra ma bo ya jang chok la ku ta na de gem sin che re mo tom tha tra ma bo de ya jang chok la ku ta de phin che ro nga ne ta de na yin za ma ra zo ku song hi ba de za chen bo zi go yo re te yang jum sin hi ba to ne za go yo re nam ji nga ra zo sem na de bo mi ba che ju cho ge gang an ra wa dang lu la na cha ge gang an ra wa dang tada rindu, teni ta not dika chuke depth so yang on dura. Dinang ke labza to so reke munedane karangsa chite la pindewa. Buba la tampe yore ne jala min chiksem semanda chada yore. Zatsangpa ke kanga ina yang nanchu depth dura take pinga yore. Rawrina teletser tundendo yongwa la pinga yore. Te mena susu donga te chondo yore. Yang ta chi susu nam pinchi chen natsa tang la soba tene kanga te yang nanchu depth in dura. Tene yang take sem to so sem so min ke cho ndo ba ji. Mune chada yore. Ten tanachi ne ta depth la yabu zego je karchen bore.
Actually, it is said that of all the enlightened activities of the Buddha, the qualities of his speech, the activities of his speech are actually the most important ones, are really his greatest qualities. Because the Buddha was alive over 2,600 years ago, and now these years later, now we have access to the teachings. And actually, when we think about that, the Buddha really was most kind to us. Actually, we need to really feel a lot of gratitude for the Buddha, because what he has left us in this world is his speech, which is called the Gangyo, the sutras, and so on, the texts, the words of the Buddha. And from the Gangyo then appeared the Dengyo, which are the commentaries on the Buddha's words. And now they still exist, and we are able to practice them, to utilize them. And these teachings really are the best medicine to heal our true illnesses. So if you really think about it, it's often very difficult for people to understand unless one really is someone who engages in authentic practice of the Buddha Dharma or is an authentic scholar and so on. Otherwise, it's maybe hard to understand, hard to really comprehend the kindness of the Buddha, of what he had left us behind. But when we just think about how his speech really is his greatest enlightened activity, for example, when we think about a very precious Lama or Guru, like myself, for example, I've met with many really precious Lamas, many great Lamas, and so mentioning that also because we are all scientists and we like to have proof of everything. So to give you just one example, maybe that will illustrate the point I'm trying to make, is an example that comes from Gachun Rinpoche's life. So Gachun Rinpoche was in prison for a long time, and at that time he had like a companion, a comrade, who also was a great Lama. And this Lama, this comrade in prison, gave him a small little book with handwritten notes, like instructions in there. And Gachun Rinpoche said that this has been of the greatest use to him in his life. Actually, he said that if he had to choose between that little book and a piece of gold that is as big as a human being, he would have preferred that little book. And he was able to say that because he saw the true value, he knew about the true value that is contained within that book. And that is why he easily would consider that as more precious than any piece of gold, any amount of gold. And if we don't really understand that, then of course we would pick the gold. We might even think that if you have so much gold, you can make so many of these little books. But actually, to have it just like that with these instructions is not so easy. And so this is one point that many of the past great masters also have mentioned. For example, and Tsongkhapa also made a praise of a kind of auspiciousness. to the Buddha, and he, within this praise, he really highlighted the most incredible qualities of the Buddha's activity of speech. And then also Nagarjuna and his disciples like Asanga and so on, they all mentioned that they all taught that of all the Buddha's activities, the Buddha's speech is the most important one. Everything is incredible, but among the most incredible qualities, the speech is most incredible. Or among the amazing things, it's the most amazing. It's because the speech of the Buddha the teachings is something that we can make direct use of. We can utilize it to become liberated. And then we are able to show this path of liberation to others. And so this is the path that these masters have found through the speech. And the speech has benefited so many. For example, what's more beneficial, to bring one person, one being to enlightenment, or to bring 1,000 people to enlightenment? So definitely the latter is of greater benefit. So therefore, that's like the speech of the Buddha, and we should recognize that, the importance of the Buddha's speech. And we recognize that based on understanding why it is so important. So now, normally in our daily lives, we experience a lot of mental unhappiness. We are dissatisfied with a lot of things. For example, we struggle in society, or we experience illness and so forth, all kinds of difficulties. And also, actually, no matter what the difficulty is, when you just take a book, a dharma book, and you look at it, you will definitely find a very useful instruction that you can apply right away for that problem. That can be of great benefit. In Tibet, we say that the dharma is the single medicine that cures 100 illnesses. It is used for anything at all. For example, if you have relationship problems, you can open up a dharma book and you will find some kind of solution. Ideally, that solution will bring you back together, but even if not, you will suffer less. So it can be applied to anything, or if you or a family member is sick and so on, look at a dharma book and you will certainly find a real medicine that nourishes the mind. So therefore, I find it's very important to always consult those dharma books.
Teni kantar che lo le jamna ya tsik re yin dun zumo kni ne yong ko yorba te tu tong ko yore lo le jamna ya tsik re yin dun zumo kni ne na ta da jin so so rang la pe lang ra ka le te sa ja thup sa re we teni ka le ten ra ja ta no song tu so ma pha ya de ka le tang teni ti ke tu kan da tang yo ba re ta ka le de tu ji bo ma sam no tang go yore ta ka le che ki de sam no gram ba tang yong ko yore Tinse de ma tre yo ya yo marwa ta tel so ba ke che ka din su ne ting go ya ta lak par de nga zo ke nan chu ke te lo de che ta te kan ra ina ta ri ta dong ro lo ba ina ta so choran su nyam nyu che chen bo yo ju ri te de nge mi sa che la go ma nan chu ke tem ra wo ina tem nan zu go re ya so tem nan zu ne so ti tem nan ke ju za ke ma de yin ba nan yi we nan ro go yo re ta Tina na logic in Tina logic manate so de so imba na yimine. Ta do window and gom cha de yorete. Gom sevandela namba mambo yorwa namjunga so. Then do gom cha de yorela, then it take deb gunne troa of the so semnang la said dea la hu pink yorela. The tini deb de lo so test che kalon of jortabala hu pink yobare. Te jumsil tin ta daran di zambo ju molang ndrawande ta nga ta mo parpa che ke yapon do mo ke la go mari tene jab jang gar chunum boche ko torta chu gada chu tok ji da chu na dela dela ta nga so la ga ne be da kon nga so parke hyuba na lo wa ta nyeng tang tene de cha yi cha ma cha tor de ga ne tene dela tene ngarang zo la ni ji ngarang zo la xie ji de na nang ko yorba den za ti so ta lo ko je te kar chen boris.
So first of all, it's important that we understand the value of these dharma texts, and that's the foundation. But of course, it's not enough. We also have to read it. We have to read those books, not just think that they're very precious. And when you read a book, then ideally you become completely immersed in it. So first, remember the kindness of the author, the one who wrote that book, because it's actually not so easy to write a book like that. First of all, like before in the past, they would have to write down every word in ink, and now maybe it's typed up on a computer, and every character was one finger hit the keyboard. So it was a lot of work. There's a lot of keyboard hits for making this entire book. And then imagine, would I be able to do that? Would I be able to go through all of that? Would I be able to make this effort to spend all of this time and energy and make the greatest effort for this book? Would I be able to do that? And then, of course, when you write a book, you can't just write down whatever comes to your mind. You have to think about it, and that's even more difficult. That's actually the greatest difficulty. You have to really think about it and write down the right thing. So when you read a book, feel some gratitude for the one who wrote the book, and actually any book, even stories that you might read, but there's no need to mention that much because you know more about those stories, like novels and so on. But now speaking about Buddhist books, when you read a Buddhist book, you should really immerse yourself completely in it. It's like it's like a story that's being told and you're the main character. So you kind of imagine that you're the one that is being talked about. You are the main character in that story, and you are basically evolving as the story goes on and progressing. So really imagine that it's really your path that is being described here. For example, when a meditation is described. And of course, there's many different kinds of meditation. But anyways, when you read a book in this way, then because you're so immersed in it, you also find great joy in it. And that will again help your mind. And therefore, by just reading a Dharma book, your mind can really be transformed, can really be changed. And so now, this commentary on the prayer of excellent conduct, for example, so I'm explaining that, and I'm just an ordinary person, so there is no weight in me saying it's a great commentary, but actually it was His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche who was so excited about this commentary, and he found it so great and excellent that he felt that everybody just must know about it. And that is why he instructed me to give these teachings and you to listen to the teachings. So anyways, if there is a Dharma book that you consider precious, it's also important that you actually read it.
Ta kandar tena like the lot the nu jin ke send wa de na ne zo da churang la ha mo le ha ma na che par chira yo mare ko go ya kares na mo ke na yin da yin sem ro ji cha de yor da mo ma yin ba ga la de lot su ke na de san ji ke chu de yong ko yo ba yin na mo ke kandar na he to go yo song he to ya ji song yo ba re san ji ke ta de da ta rang ran zo ro yin na book kara yimba karin na he na nanchu te ke tin na he to ko mado se ya yo mare he to ko yore te nanchu ke korang ke tanda che yong ko yores ta te ndu ta darang arang zon da wa ina poke na he ke yo ta ta poke zama zanjang na he ke yore inji ke zama zanjang na he ke yore inji ta inji se ke chapchi ja chenpo che re te ne ta dara venami ke na zama zanjang na he ke yore ta te ndu ke mawo wa ke kanga hira mado churang ke lai ke da lo ke mawo na tesa dragere sosuke de yapo code de tinana ni teni jine churang tsar yabo yo na ramji te pa tanda we na yin la pin ta na teni yabo yo res ta den de tinana suma na yin teni de ta yong hyo se ta dara ngarang su ngus yong ko yo wa tinana la do tsigang ta ma de 산제 손라 따든 죽버 제시 다 산제 그 손데 솔라 따도 롱주버 효스면 오래도나 다디 몰람테 가소게 제완디 제와 내게 난게 체도 나오다 양나 제와 하마 가롱 질라 자자자 몰람 따비야네 데 다랑가랑 수테 롱주야 요 바로와 다 드라사노테 거고요래 좀에 발은 데베치나 teni ta kemsa hyu chan ro ya yu song yo re den de jo me pa lan den de che ma re jo re le ting go wa no jo te ngon ro go yo re de bu te ji su yong go yo re ta ten da jum sin la den nga zo la ta ra da ta bo long su chu ya yo ban so su nam chen bo yi se te su nam te nga ja la jo ma yo nga ja la jo ya na nga ja se ju te ne so so yong ti yong khin je na yong ti me pa lan jo ro ya ke tok na yin re 당 수남대 지수이랑 라 저나 되네 펜도 요리야 데 수수수남대 야 마냥 바콘도 페드 되네 다지 인란데 다 롱수 주바 요효 맞sol로 요바 나 인게 삼네 데 데이터 돈네 로고 요바레.
So it mentions now all these like different languages, like the gods and the nagas and the yakshas. So you don't have to worry about not understanding those languages because the Dharma is available in the human language. So, and also you can think if the Dharma is even understood by the Nagas and the Yakshas and so on, all of these spirits, then of course the Dharma can be transmitted with clarity in any human language. So because you might wonder that how can now maybe there won't be so I have to take a sip of water. Someone might wonder that maybe it's not available in my language and maybe it doesn't exist in the human language and the Dharma cannot be expressed in all its clarity in our languages, but that's not true because it can even be expressed very clearly in any other language, like the non-human language, a God language, the Naga language, and so on. For example, nowadays, the Dharma can be explained with a complete clarity in a Tibetan language, and likewise, it can be explained with complete clarity in the English language. And it's often English now because it's the most widely spread language. But any other language too, like in the Vietnamese language, for example, it can be explained just as clear. So one will not run into the problem of not having a language available to receive the Dharma really purely. Because even the gods and the Nagas are able to receive it purely. So surely, as human beings, we are able to receive the Dharma purely. And then once we have received the Dharma purely, then we heed the Dharma. We listen to it and we practice it in stages. So here this prayer says that may I enjoy and utilize these teachings. And so then if we make a prayer, it will happen according to this prayer. So it says here in the last line in the Tibetan, which is the beginning of the English, may I always heed the pure speech. So may I always heed the teachings of the Buddha. May I always be able to hear the teachings and utilize them. And if you make this aspiration will be fulfilled according to the aspiration, either in this life, at a different part in your life, or in a future life. But with complete certainty, you will be able to encounter and utilize, practice the Dharma teachings according to your aspirations, because the aspiration is the cause of the fulfillment, the accomplishment. And if the cause is present, then there will be a result. So in order for there to be a result, however, there has to be a cause. If you don't have the cause, then there cannot be a result. So the aspiration would be the cause. And if it's there, you have the cause. And then therefore, naturally, the result later on will follow. And so then, even though we pray that may I have the merit to always enjoy the Dharma, if that is fulfilled, then we also should not feel arrogant or prideful about it. Because if we become arrogant, then the qualities that we do possess will turn into faults, because arrogance is very toxic for the mind. So therefore, when the merit of enjoying the Dharma arises, just rejoice in that and continue the practice to increase this experience on an ongoing basis. So the prayer that we really are making here is that may myself and also all others always be able to enjoy the Dharma.
Tatio the Yipa, the Yin Hikbu, Chujun Kolo Goralan Juba Shivatere. That the Yin Hikba Shiba de Chitangan Husim by in the Da under Jod Devan and David Deva Sala. Sir in the Dene, Drunkin tel the Yin Hiba, Tessori, Sanjijum din the Lasoba Chad Yorwa. Dene, that Chujun Kolo Goralan Jubarho, Senata Mola Jacayore. Ati mola de jago sarita mari sano jitana. Karpa rena na, paja karpa rena roshina. Resare ta Sanji chujun kolo kon re mato ta deta zepa juni kun number tone pimkinte yonko yo marwa. Ta tin dara de lang aran zola ta hyakja ta timba se ta timba te timba te chade yo marwa. Tati timba de chad yudu de lo nidong trukjang to pep sarvarwa. Tang aranzo de kapsu sharipum na mari, tipa kapsu mongarpu na mari, kungawo na mari, karichi mari ngazo. De kapsu simchin jiriwe sinane, yinda yin kowa na yup simchin jirawa. Tene karichin de la majire. Tasano jitana. So leg driba gwange machirwa let mazang. Ta dedu xia de ba gen kol loma jile ji song yong ba yin na. Chu ji de zhe ngu su long si jie ne, ta dara da bu xin kang ga rong yo je ri. Yang na jie sim jin zhe dong le zhe pai yong ba yin na ya rang wang yu bu tong ne. Ta jiang qiu sim ba tam jie sam yin de ne jie wa lang ne pai yong ju den da yin si ba ri, den da yin na tang ko ge dong ha ge la semra yo marita. Dong hawa chi to yo mare. Ta tarang around so la mundo ba mambo je to de ne na cha dang jin par che mambo yong man de. Gare je ne yong ge yore. Ta around so ge le je drpa de mazang ne dik jum sin de ne le maze pa dan ne mete se pa ne chu mza we serna de nga so la de nyang de ge yore. Nyang yong wa de o nge le sa yin yin da yin nga su ko sam to ko yo mar da sam go ri lab de ba yin ya sam to ko yo mar wa ta gare sam go re ngala mo go si ngala dong ha mo go se je te re da dong ha mo go se na ya dong ha ke le de sa cha re da mo go se je den sa tra le sa je de nga ta teni ta ti pa ro de na ko ga da ra wo je pa ro la cha su ma wa ta le sa ji de nga ta sang ma le ji sa ya wa ta de we mi ro ta 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 mi di ta le chen khang ra wo chi ne le ngi ba sa ji te chu du kya re si ne che chung chung ro chi ko no ko tu chu ki cha ne mang bu ha ro cha wa ro da lap sa ke me wa ta dong ha chu yo ta yong ha ta song se na ne lap sa ke me wa yong cha wa dong ha te ta yong do wan de te ni ngu su san je ke song xiar zhu mo na ni ta ngu su song ne ta ne de kap so per na ngarang zong ne da ne che kornga de zambu nang ke karong che na kanda chi ba la sam sam ro che ngu ne cho yo go ri le yo go yo nga zo nang ba mang bu la de ne san je ke dim ba ye de ne dim ba ni de dim ba ye ne de ne ta ra de din ye ma ta chu dok se ne pa chu dok lo rem chi tar ne de ne dim ba re song de ne gom ja chi de nyam ni na de ne ri rem chi sa ta lam ko to ba zu ngun tu chur तारा सांजे के जेपा जिन दो तीन नंग तेला दे लो दे यामना ते मो ते जे जी यामना ते के देप तो लो रंग ने ता ने कंडा या बुंदो ते सांजे के नमथार टिंगल लामनी ता ते इंदु कंदर ते ngacho तेला ता खोवाला ता नाडो बचे ला yang ku yudu ता तारा तारो मोला माता ngacho तारो जे लेलो तनावे चिरता माओ बाला जत्सप संबंग गो फेरवा ती कब से या खोज थोमानी de jewo ke ta molam ja go yo rang ne bide खोज थोमानी de jewo molam mambo yo rang ara zo sambo molam la so dong ko yo wa de sona no yo re de di zamju molam na de de yo re da molam ji ja wo yen bijin sing de sam na tang je de karchim bores.
Next is a fourth point, which is the kind of entering into the maybe you can even say immersing oneself in the dharma wheel of the Sugata or the Buddha. So the the Buddha in the past, he has taught the dharma wheel of the cause of happiness, the cause which is virtue, the cause which leads to happiness, brings one to a corresponding result. And that is what the Buddha had realized. He was the one who had perfectly practiced that. And when we think about that, then we know that whether or not we should immerse ourselves in the Buddha's teachings, in the Dharma wheel of the wheels of the Buddha. So clearly, once we know that, we should immerse ourselves in the teachings. So we speak about there having been many aeons in the past, and in each aeon, kind of each time, there's a certain time period, one Buddha appears to turn the wheel of Dharma. And there's only one Buddha who comes to this world performing the 12 enlightened deeds and then turns the wheel of Dharma. So in each aeon, there's only one Buddha who does that. And the Buddha of this age is the Buddha Shakyamuni. Now is the time of Shakyamuni's teachings. And the Buddha Shakyamuni was alive about 2,600 years ago. And when he was alive, what were we then at that time? So we were not Shariputra, and we were not Modgalyana, and we were also not Ananda. So who were we at that time? Well, certainly we have been a sentient being wandering in samsara. And why is it that we were not born as one of those disciples of the Buddha? It's because of our karmic obscurations. It's because we have not purified them sufficiently at that time. So if we would have been alive at that time as the Buddha's disciples and would have directly received the nectar of his Dharma teachings, then now we would probably be in some Pure Land or as a bodhisattva, we would have intentionally come back to benefit sentient beings. Certainly, we would not experience the suffering of samsara any longer had we been the Buddha's disciples at that time. So clearly, the fact that we do experience a lot of suffering shows that we have in fact not been the Buddha's disciples at that time, because we do encounter a lot of undesirable things in our life. We are unhappy and we are sick. We encounter many obstacles and problems all the time. And the reason why is that because we have not purified our karmic obscurations. It is said that if karma is not created, a result cannot be encountered. But if karma is created, then it will be encountered, and this karmic seed will never become spoiled. It will ripen. So when people suffer, of course, if you really understand that, you will think that that's my karma, of course. But most people cannot think that way, and even if they know it, and if you tell them that this is actually, this is how you should think, it's actually karma, then it's hard for people to really be receptive to that, and they don't really want to think about it in this way. Know that karma is in fact responsible for their suffering. And on the other hand, they do say that, nevertheless, I don't want to suffer. But then the problem is, if you have created the cause of suffering, then you suffer. So even though you don't want to suffer, it's a little bit too late now, because you have already created the cause of suffering. So from this perspective of the ripening of karma, it's too late. And also, you cannot go back in time to an earlier point and remove that cause that has already been created, because now is the time where it's already ripening. So when you experience the ripening of negative karma, of course, it's not kind of like just like putting someone down and just saying, so therefore you're bad or so. It's just that it ripens, but it's too late to do anything about it. So when we say it's your karma, it doesn't mean there's something bad. It's just it's ripening now already. So then it's not so easy for us to really hear that at that time, to really be receptive for some advice like that. So when the Buddha was alive, for example, how we should feel is that even though we might not have been the disciples, but for example, the Buddha had the first assembly of his disciples were called the 5 fortunate disciples around the Buddha. And when we hear about that, we really should have this kind of feeling that we were really there and received these teachings. And for example, as Buddhist practitioners, maybe this is the feeling that we develop. And so, for example, at that time, the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. And so then he gave these teachings to his 5 disciples. First, the first 2 truths. And so there were different sets of teachings he gave on the Four Noble Truths. So in total, he came to 16 levels of impermanence and so on. So basically, as he gave instructions, that those disciples practiced step by step, and they actualized step by step the various qualities of the bhumis and the paths. And so just like that, we can put ourselves into that perspective. Because otherwise, nowadays, when we just hear about the Buddha, we might watch a movie on the Buddha's life and his activities, or read a book about it. But then we still might feel that we're left behind in samsara. So, and that's also why we make aspiration prayers, because we make prayers, but then at the same time, we are still lazy in our practice. So that's why we are still left behind. And so then there will be a future Buddha, the Buddha Maitreya. And again, we are praying to be born, even if we are not born in Shakyamuni's time, as Shakyamuni's disciple, we can still pray to be born as Maitreya's disciples, the future Buddha. So there are many prayers where we pray to be born among the foremost of disciples at the time of the Buddha Maitreya. For example, there is the aspiration prayer to Maitreya and many more prayers. And if we set our intention and make such an aspiration, then it will also be fulfilled accordingly. So therefore it's important to really think about it when you recite those prayers.
다 대인도 좀 식배 저와 탐제다 콜루츠나 랍도코와예 대다 그냥 수양 메젤라 로이도 지다 자랍든 조소 다 산제 탐제 그 추중 콜로제 요르와 대 추중 콜로 다 자침보 고와 대다 탐제 다 Then take Yishi Topji, so that Sanjay Yishi the Kani Yongre, Sanjay Namchin Yishi the Kawani Yongre said. Sanjay Namchin Yite, Ja Chungsan Hina, Tara Suzuji in Bukaps, Laksan Namdaje, Dua Simba Zamboje, Dinion. Simba the Zambo de Yas, Janchoka Semanger, Janchoka Sem data, then Dan Ya, Nanjung Sam Lasovas, and then Topak over Jope, Teta Villayanger, didn't they Remji Namparnea. 남친기 히 차송리 대 남친기 히 되게 되네 두 깔바 된자 준릉보 그 바드 되네 심진 담제 그 감당 삼바 무바라서만 침부터네 저 송자 되네 다랑아랑 졸로 됐다고 롱수 주버 그거 갑대 요데 바래 되네 될랑 콜로 세고든 가레리스드 콜로 시바데 반지용 바찬인 콜로스 따레 대 인동을 심진 탐치의 그 심주라 Then choose 콜로데 코토고요 세르다 나데 심신 탐지 그 셈라 choose 콜로 거기 choose 콜로 거라 then 거기다 거기 다 마지게다 산제르라 산제 그 거와 중걸 공기 산제라와 다 데이터블은 좋고시 몰라래
So the verse here in the Blue Prayer Book is on page 56, the second one. May I possess the perfect intelligence to heed the endless melody of speech when the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future turn the wheels of dharma. So the Buddhas, this perfect intelligence here, the Buddhas turn the wheel of dharma in many vast and inconceivable ways, and they do this because they possess the power of primordial wisdom. They possess omniscient wisdom. And actually, where does this omniscient wisdom really come from? So in simple terms, from the perspective of an ordinary person, it begins with having a good heart. And then that develops into bodhicitta, which then develops into the direct perception of a yogic perception. And then that increases and develops into the essence of mind, which is the highest realization, the omniscient wisdom. So finally, this is how the perfected wisdom of the Buddha comes about. And so here it says, so in the Buddhas of the past, present, and future, may they turn the wheel of the Dharma. Past, present, and future also meaning for many aeons, for a long time, through their omniscient wisdom and for the sake of sentient beings, may they turn the wheel of Dharma. And it's because that's what they have done that now we have the opportunity to still enjoy the Dharma teachings. So this wheel here of the wheel of Dharma, the wheel here is something that it implies something that is unceasing, something that constantly turns. So may the dharma wheel unceasingly turn for the sake of sentient beings.
Thank you very much.
The dedication, the yellow prayer book on page 11 and then 16. By this merit may I attain omniscience, having defeated the enemies, my wrongdoings. May I liberate all beings who are tossed in the ocean of samsara by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Page 16. Just as the hero Manjushri realized things as they are, and as did Samantabhadra too, I will follow in their path and perfectly dedicate all these virtues. And then the blue prayer book, page 64, verse 21. May every being ailing with disease be freed at once from every malady. May all the sickness that afflicts the living be instantly and permanently healed.